Bringing you live visuals from inside Parliament, where President Matamela Ramaphosa just a short while ago concluded his question and answer session, which largely focused on the energy crisis that the country is dealing with at the moment. There were other questions around the security or weaknesses in our security system, plus also the controversial Russian Lady R vessel that docked at Simonstown Naval Base late last year, allegedly to be loaded with weapons for Russia. But the president choosing not to answer that question fully, saying that there's an inquiry looking into those reports, and that because this was a new question being put to him this afternoon, he would not answer it fully. And he was supported in that by Nosiviwe Mapisa-Nqakula as the Speaker of the Assembly, saying that it's a new question the president can choose to answer or not to do so. But let's focus on the energy crisis and see what has come out. To help me with some insights and analysis is Professor Lwazi Ngubevana, Director of the African Energy Leadership Center at the Wits Business School in Johannesburg, joining us now for that analysis or following that question and answer session. Good afternoon, Lwazi. Can I begin here? The president has denied that government has failed to deal with the electricity crisis. He was asked that pointed question a little bit earlier, and he said, no, they are doing everything that they can, and that the ministries, about 4 ministries, are working together: electricity, energy, mineral resources, public enterprises, and that of environment, to manage this just energy transition and the crisis. What do you make of what he said?
Good afternoon, Braden. Yeah, he did deny that the government has failed, but I think the facts speak for themselves. We currently, in stage 6 of load shedding, and by all accounts, I wouldn't be surprised if we get to in stage 10 of load shedding before the winter is over. I know some of that gets, disguised under things like load curtailment, but the bottom line is that we're taking load from the grid.
Yeah, and I mean, he mentions words like we need emergency supply. We're not going to let go of all the coal-fired power stations, let alone our new babies, Kusile and Medupi. We still need them as part of the grid, but we need load shedding to stabilize it.
Yes, I was actually surprised when you spoke about the emergency procurement. And what seems to be his views in terms of what has got us here, the core challenges by the NGOs and the like. But I think the biggest problem for me, I'm finding, is that even the procurement that's getting done, it seems to me that we're procuring for capacity. We're not procuring for dispatchable energy. The Minister of Electricity spoke about potentially 15 gigawatts being up for auction in the next round of REAP. But that's capacity. That's not dispatchable energy. And it's also not going to solve our short-term problem.
Yeah. The other matter which I found very interesting, I don't know what you make of it. You've mentioned the Minister of Electricity. His full mandate has not yet been completed. The president said it's going to be announced soon. I mean, it's like when he was announced at the State of the Nation address in February, it was all amongst the fanfare. One would have assumed that a lot of groundwork had been done before that, but now it looks like the president is going back to say, this is where we should have started. And that might curtail the ability of Hussein Ramaphosa to really be effective in his role.
That is a serious problem. It is something that I raised right at the beginning when he was appointed to this position. I don't understand what the thinking was. You can't appoint a minister with zero powers. The Electricity Regulation Act sits with the Department of Mineral Resources and Energy, and we've got also, in fact, over and above the 4 ministries, you've got the National Treasury that's involved in essentially the operations of Eskom, because they've taken over Eskom's debt. There's too many hands in this pie. There's too many cooks. And quite frankly, we're in a state of chaos. Nobody knows who's doing what, who's responsible for what. Yeah. You hear comments like, NECOM will be responsible for doing some energy modeling. But that's the responsibility of the Department of Mineral Resources and Energy. How is that going to happen?
In fact, in fact, the president...
that's a policy matter.
Yeah, in fact, it was the president said no. He tried to explain that what the electricity minister is doing, he's focusing on capacity, on generating more capacity, on the generation of more electricity, and the public enterprises is focusing on procurement, and as a shareholder on the restructuring of Eskom. The Ministry of Energy and Mineral Resources is focusing on national policy matters. I mean, it can be a little bit confusing, but the president was at pains to say it's all integrated. Should we believe him?
Absolutely not. It is chaotic. I think what they perhaps need to do is just to say the Minister of Electricity is now the CEO of Eskom. The way it is right now, it is never going to work. And I think we will still be here in a few months' time having the same discussion.
Okay.
And, this is something that really should have happened right at the beginning, while they were still conceptualizing the idea of having a Minister of Electricity. And I, for the life of me, do not understand why you'd want to separate electricity from energy. Electricity is just another energy carrier.
Yeah, the other issue that he was asked about, and that came up in this Q&A in Parliament just a short while ago, was that court ruling that happened recently, where the High Court, North Gauteng in Pretoria, ruling that all hospitals, clinics, schools and police stations should be exempt from power cuts, and government saying they are going to appeal this decision in court. And Ramaphosa this afternoon saying it's not because government is arrogant, but it's concerned about the impact and the practicality of that on load shedding and the grid.
Yeah, I for once I do agree with that statement. I think it is just impractical. If you think about it, we've got thousands and thousands, over 20,000 schools in this country. And these schools, and we're talking public schools, these are embedded within our communities. How many police stations? I don't know, something over 3,000 police stations across the country. Now, how on earth are we going to isolate those buildings, individual buildings, from the grid? I have no idea. And if we're looking at procurement of, I don't know, diesel generators and the procurement of diesel itself, firstly, just getting in line, standing in the queues to try and procure those, those diesel generators is going to take us a very, very long time. And secondly, the cost to the economy, it is just impractical.
Yeah, okay. Finally, Lwazi, the other issue that still, I mean, this one just dogs Eskom. Each time you talk about Eskom, is corruption at Eskom. The president today saying that he was not in possession of any evidence related to cabinet members or senior government officials being involved in corruption at Eskom. Of course, this is post the interview that my colleague Annika Larsen did here on eNCA with the former CEO, Andre de Ruyter. The president today saying he wanted to repeat that if there's any evidence available or information, it needs to be brought forward, and then investigations would take place. Your thoughts on that?
Well, he is correct. I mean, firstly, he doesn't have the power to act. The law enforcement agencies have to act on this. Of course, there's been an accusation, by Prof. Makgoba, the previous Eskom board chair, that government was aware of these accusations and that evidence was presented. But I think that, and that the law enforcement agencies were, sluggish in acting on these. I think this needs to be tested. I think that, if the former chair has evidence and it can prove that this was presented to government and law enforcement agencies, this needs to be brought out. I don't think anybody can deny that there is a problem at Eskom and outside of Eskom. And quite frankly, I think we need to look at the private sector, and ask what their role has been in breaking down Eskom. Because Eskom employees cannot be corrupt by themselves. You need a corruptor and a corruptee for this relationship to work. And from the president's perspective, I do agree. I mean, he cannot act. It's the law enforcement agencies that do need to act, but they can only act on evidence.
Yeah, they can only act on evidence. Final question to you, Lwazi. Overall, hearing what the president had to say around the whole energy crisis and Eskom and so forth, your take, just overall, is there light at the end of this dark tunnel?
Well, yeah, excuse the pun, but I absolutely do not see a light. The reality is that So even some of the so-called public participation, through the PCC and other entities and NICOM that are trying to assist the president, quite frankly, a lot of them have been, I suppose, tick box exercises, quite frankly. If you've attended any of the sessions, you realize that there has been no, wide consultation. I mean, even within the DMRE, for example, if you were in the sessions, you would have heard officials from the DMRE putting their case forward, and yet you've got, commissioners at the peace, quite frankly, refusing to listen to reason, refusing to people who are responsible for modeling our energy set up as a country. And then you ask yourself, what is the point of this, other than just ticking boxes and saying, yes, we held a colloquium here, we held another discussion there. For me, it's just a window dressing exercise. I don't see them truly trying to hear the voices of the people and getting real input from the people responsible for energy security.
Yeah, to stop load shedding and improve our situation. And, Prof, you and I know about the impact of load shedding on the economy, for example, and other sectors of life. I mean, just this afternoon, the rand is now sitting at 19.30 rand to the US dollar. And that cannot be good news at all for us. Thank you very much for your time and your analysis here on Today on eNCA this afternoon. Professor Lwazi Ngubevana, Director of the African Energy Leadership Center at the Wits Business School.